Welcome to the show, Chula.
Thanks, man. How are you?
Good. How are you, bud?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I had family here and some friends around for supper for Sunday lunch, and that was really nice. But otherwise, I'm good.
Good. What's your sober date?
My sober day is the 29th of June, 2003.
Oh, so you got over 20 years now.
Just turned 21 years in June. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
What was going on June 28th of 2003?
I was in a rehab, and funnily enough, I did a ex-peer share for that rehab yesterday, so it just coincided. It was the day before this, and it's a place called Cloud's House in Wiltshire in the UK, and I was there, and that was my last day of detox. So I did like a 16-day detox, MSTs, lofexidine. Coming off basically methadone, heroin, and lots of daily skunk. So they gave me quite a bit of stuff, but brought it down over those 16 days. And the 17th day was the 29th of June, 2003. And that was the first day clean I'd had for 17 years, since I was like about 13, 14.
We'll get into all that. What sent you to detox? What was the reason you went to detox?
I just couldn't stop, man. Couldn't stop. Like the last 2 years of my using, really, I was trying to stop, and I was trying to just stick to my methadone and not use heroin, or I was trying to, come off the methadone somehow, and I just couldn't do it. I could not do it. I was a bit of a baby, really. I'd get like half a day or a day into a cluck or something, or even maybe get to the second day, and I just couldn't handle it. I was just going mad, and just the feeling and the hot, the cold, the sweats, the jitteriness, and all the dark thoughts that used to come up for me. I just couldn't handle it. So I always end up using. And that had been going on, I would say, solidly for 2 years, that whole thing of, okay, I'm going to do it today, or I'm going to do it next week, or I'm going to do it tomorrow. And just kept using, and just couldn't stop. And then it was around, if I remember rightly, it was also the 12th. It was the February the 12th that year. I kind of just woke up and I was like, I got to go to rehab. Like, I can't do this. I'd gone to a few meetings, but I'd gone there high and just been high and fucking, sacked everyone off, judged everyone. And I don't know, I just woke up and realized I can't stop, man. I've got to have bricks and mortar in between me and my drugs, because otherwise I just use. And it was that real recognition of power, like, I'm powerless, I'm out of control here, and I've got to go away somewhere. So that's what happened.
Had you been to rehab before?
No, I'd never been to rehab before. I'd been engaged with the services that were dishing out my methadone, but they were, it was all harm reduction stuff. They weren't really concerned in getting people clean. So it was just, how you doing kind of thing. And I'd never even considered rehab, but I was seeing a counselor. So I was seeing a guy I went to my GP like about 3, maybe 4 years before that, who my GP was giving me the methadone. Eventually I got it transferred over to him. I mean, typical addict, right? I went to, like, probably 5 years before I got clean, I went to a drug service, and through the drug service, I got methadone, but it was supervised consumption. And then I was like, man, this is terrible. So I went to my GP and I convinced him to take over the prescribing and give me weekly prescribing. So, and he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't have a fucking clue. So I just said to him, I'm working. I was working at a Virgin Megastore, and I was like, it's really difficult to do supervised daily, shots. So can you just let me, prescribe it for me weekly? And he was like, yeah, sure. And then I did that, and I was getting this bottle every, and I think I must have been on about 50 or 60 by that point, 60 mils. And then I just kept going back to him and saying, look, it's not working, I need more. And he didn't really know what he was doing. So he gave me more and more and more. And then at one point I was getting 170 a day. So I would go to, I wasn't using it all. I would go to the chemist and get 4 glass brown bottles of methadone, right? And then I would like carry them home clinking, and then put them in this cupboard, top of this cupboard that I had in my bedroom. Take a few swigs of it and then put it back. And then I would only really use it if I couldn't score and I was starting to cluck. Then I would have some. But I just started stockpiling this methadone. Then I started selling it because, you know, other addicts would buy it, and I could get some cash for heroin. And that's how it was those last few years, really. And I'd give it away. And I had a girlfriend who I was using with, so I'd give some to her. But yeah, I didn't really take the whole methadone thing very seriously. But it became like, you know, and then my mum and my dad, who were fed up of me stealing off them and stuff, they were saying, you know, you've got to get help. You've got to get help. They didn't know it was heroin. They thought they knew I smoked dope, and I think they thought it was just that. But they said, you've got to get help. And then I went to the doctor. I said, look, have you got a counselling service? Because I thought if I sort my emotional stuff out, then maybe I wouldn't want to use drugs. So I went to him, and he said, oh, okay, you can access our counselling service. So I went to this woman, and after one assessment, she said to me, look, I can't deal with you. Like, you're a drug addict, you're chronically addicted, you're too complex for me, but I'll hand you over to this guy. So she sent me to this guy called Simon Good, and he was an addictions counsellor and a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. And I went to see him, and he said, look, I can't do the therapy with you because you're intoxicated, but if you want to come and see me every week and chat about what's going on, maybe we can find our way. I can support you to find your way. It's like, yeah, sure. So I was doing it to keep my mum happy. She was paying for it. I just went every week, completely stoned. I would sit at a bus stop and smoke loads of heroin and smoke a spliff, and then go in, fucked out my head. Sorry, am I allowed to swear? Is that all right?
Yep. No, you're good.
Sorry, I do swear a bit. And then slowly, and then he started drip feeding me stuff. So he started saying, have you ever heard of NA? I didn't know what it was. Told me all about it. And then he was like, have you ever heard of treatment? And he gave me this video, this VHS cassette of the rehab that I eventually went to. It was like a BBC Two documentary on Cloud's house. And I watched it, and I was like, that's not for me. And then I kept saying to him, yeah, okay, I'll go to one of those meetings. But I never did. I just kind of put him off. And then after a year of him asking me, really gently, just saying to me, oh, have you been to a meeting? And I'd be like, nah, and then talk about, just waffle on to him. I just thought I better go to one because he's obviously getting pissed off. Well, he wasn't, but that's what I thought. So I went to a meeting, and I just thought it was nuts. I just thought, all these people complaining about why they can't use drugs, but they really want to. Why don't they just go and use drugs like me? And I had drugs in my pocket and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then I probably went to about 5 or 6 meetings in that last year before I woke up that day. And I think something went in, you know, I think unconsciously there was a part of me that connected to the truth that people were sharing. And that made a difference to, you know, my brain processes, I think, really. It changed. There was a cognitive shift, and that's when I woke up. I still didn't go to meetings, though, and I still used up until the day that I stepped into rehab. But it kind of got me to there.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in North London. So my parents are from Sri Lanka. My dad came over here in the early 60s on his own, and he was an accountant and training as a lawyer as well. And he was on his own, and then in I think 1970 or 71 he went back to Sri Lanka, and he was introduced to my mum. Actually, they don't do the arranged thing; they do like an introduction, so they kind of get pushed together, and if it works, it works, and if they don't, then they don't. And if they meet people on their way before that happens, then they choose to marry. But he hadn't found anyone, and then he was introduced to my mum, and they hit it off and got married and came back. And then I was born in 1974, and then I got a brother who's 2 years younger, and then 3 years younger, another one who's 2 years younger than him.
Okay, so you're the oldest of 3?
Oldest of 3 boys, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the oldest of 3 also.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. There's definitely a thing with firstborn children, right?
Yeah, I think it's because um our parents, they didn't have like the internet to learn how to parent. And so they give you all these rules and structure. And as the oldest, there's nobody to make the mistakes in front of you. So you kind of push all the boundaries and
Totally.
break all the rules and kind of rebel.
Yeah.
Because but when I grew up, my parents were like, you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't do
Oh,
this. And so it pushed me into drinking at an early age.
yeah.
You know, I was 11 when I started drinking. And so my parents realized when I was 16, they're going to drink. We just need to help them control it.
Yeah.
And so by the time my brother turned 16, he was allowed to have friends sleep over and drink in the basement. And as long as they were sleeping over. And then by the time my sister was 16, she could have parties at the house as long as my parents were there to supervise and collect keys.
Yeah.
So, you know, they learned, and my brother and sister are far from addicts.
Yeah.
And I think they learned all the lessons that I was doing and learned what not to do.
Yeah, totally the same, man. I mean, mine was even more extreme because I was a complete nightmare from a very young age, really difficult to contain. And they were just trying to contain me. But the more they tried to do that, the more I wanted to break out. And it just didn't work. And then with the next one, they were like, okay, well, we're not going to do that. And he was just really well behaved, really, really, you know, they're both beautiful guys, but he was just really um, a really sweet child and just really, really well behaved all the time. And then the little one, he's kind of in between us, so he's got a bit of an edge, but he's really well behaved as well. So they were never a problem, you know, they were never a problem to my parents at all. And and I always say, you know, the middle one was a bit of a golden child, and then the last one was a bit of a lost child, and I was definitely the black sheep. You know,
Yeah,
there
me
was no
too.
question.
What did you discover first, drugs or alcohol?
Well, for me, you see, it was actually cigarettes that were the thing. So what happened to me was, well, the most profound thing that happened was my mum went blind when I was 4. So when I was 4 years old, my mum started to go blind, and over a period of time, she lost her sight completely. And they had to cut her optic nerves for various reasons. And I didn't really think that much of that, because by the time I could conceptualize it, we had all got kind of used to it. And she's a very strong, courageous woman, and made sure that she did everything. So she cooked, she cleaned, she took us to school, she did everything, even though she couldn't see. And she's done a lot more since with her life. But for me, what I learned in rehab and what I've learned in recovery and therapy as well is that kind of severing of eye contact as a child. So I'd had eye contact with her for like those first 3.5 years, and all of a sudden it's gone, and like I don't know what's going on. For me, that was an abandonment. It was an abandonment, a rejection. It's given me loads of trust issues, especially around women and stuff, and it had a really profound effect on me. But I didn't know that. But what was happening on the surface was I just became really naughty. So I became really loud, and I knew that if I wanted attention, I had to make noise because you couldn't see what I was doing. And I became pretty boisterous. And I think my addictive behavior was there. You know, I would get really, really obsessed with things. And then as soon as I got it, I would throw it away. A lot of my toys, I would break them or set them on fire and stuff like that. And then I started hanging around. Well, there were some older kids on our street and some older kids in the area who used to kind of basically bully me. You know, they used to bully me, but at the same time, they were kind of cool. So I wanted to be around them. You know, they were about 5 or 6 years older. And it started off as bullying, and then it kind of went into these weird sort of sexual games. And then it kind of, when I was 9.5, there was a couple of incidents when it got quite violent and quite serious, and I was quite horribly sexually abused by 2 of them over one summer. It happened a few times over one summer, And
Two of who?
pardon?
Two of who?
Two of the guys in this group of older kids. Yeah. And I was 9.5. And so I was around what we would call third year in the junior school. And I think it's different numbers now, though. But I was in my friend's garden, and we were playing in his garden. I can't remember what we were doing. And his dad was painting on a ladder. And this cigarette, half a cigarette, just landed in front of me. And I just picked it up and started smoking it. Like and it gave me a head rush straight away. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I kept smoking it. And I was like, this tiny little kid, and started smoking it. And then I was like, hey man, can you get us any more cigarettes? So he went and found this. They had this glass ashtray on a coffee table where they kept loose cigarettes. So he would nick one and come back, give it to me, and then I would smoke it. And then from then on, I was smoking. So my quest in life became, by any means necessary, get cigarettes. So I had friends whose parents smoked, and I'd try and steal cigarettes off them. And then I knew some older kids who hid them on this roundabout, and I used to go and steal a couple from the packet and stuff, and got beaten up for that once, actually. And then I found a shop. Like when I was about 11, one of my mates at school said, oh, I know a shop where we can buy cigarettes. Like you just take your uniform off and like just go in really bullshit, and they just sell it to you. So we found this shop where we could buy cigarettes at 11 years old. So I did that. And around the same time, I started stealing my dad's whiskey. So he had like a drinks cabinet, and I would just take a little bit out into a glass and then go up to my room and just sip it and smoke out the window. And that was it, man. It was just it. I didn't really realize how good it felt. But there was another thing that came in at that point, which was music. So I discovered Metallica when, I was about 10, 11. I discovered Metallica. Someone gave me Master of Puppets, or it may have been even Ride the Lightning. But I discovered them and got into Iron Maiden and stuff like that. And it just, again, I didn't really understand what was happening to me. But now, with all the knowledge that I have from recovery and being a clinician myself, I know that there was a part of my traumatized self that was connecting with the music, and I had a lot of anger and rage about my situation, and that's what I heard coming out of the speakers, and it really relaxes me. Like even to this day, I can put Slipknot on my headphones and fall asleep. Like it brings me down. Like it doesn't fire me up. I can get fired up, like if I go to a gig or if I'm playing. But like if I listen to metal, I relax. Like it does something to me physiologically that relaxes me and brings me down. So I fell in love with that, and I found a tribe. But along with that was cigarettes, alcohol, and then dope smoking when I was again the same age, 11, 12,
Yeah, I mean, Metallica, they're known for back in the 90s, they're drinking and smoking.
Yeah.
They were party animals, and now they're all sober, coincidentally.
Yeah.
Now they're all sober, and, James Hetfield's sober and puts out that vibe now.
Yeah.
But definitely in the 90s, they were drinking and partying and putting that image out there. And you being an impressionable rebellion kind of guy, I'm sure you fell into that.
Yeah. It was great at the time.
When did you start smoking weed? How old were you?
It was around that age, because there was a couple of guys who had it or had some, so I kind of experimented with it. I remember actually one of my very first bands was with a guy who played double bass, and he played bass guitar. There's another guy called John, played drums, and we used to just jam. And he suddenly brought it out, and I puffed on it. It was great. And then when I was 13, one of my friends at school, he had an older brother who was a dealer, and he linked me up with him. And then I had my own source, and a lot of my friends at that time either hadn't smoked dope or they didn't have their own sources to be able to get it. So I became a dealer at that point. Like, obviously not some sort of criminal mastermind, but
I was just going to ask you how you supported your habit as a kid.
Well, I was always a bit sort of entrepreneurial in that I realized that, say, for instance, if I bought an extra packet of 20 cigarettes, I could sell single cigarettes for like £1 or whatever. And then, or less than that at the time, it was like 25 pence, I think. But I could then, get a bit of money back. But I used to make sandwiches and take like loads of sandwiches to school and then sell these sandwiches at break time to get money for cigarettes and alcohol. And then things like pornographic magazines and, whatever I could do to make money. And I was working already. I was working in a shop and doing a paper round. But dope was really good because these other kids couldn't get any. I had my guy. So I would like get everyone's money in and then go and buy, like, it wasn't really much at that time, an eighth or a quarter, and then chop it up into bits and everyone would get their little bit. And I always became, and then after that, I did start dealing. So by the time I was 16, I was getting in an ounce or two, and then bagging it all up and selling it, and then getting mine for free, which meant I had a really plentiful supply and could stay stoned from morning till night.
Yeah, I remember being at that age and breaking up into grams. You know what I mean? Just to make $20 back.
Yeah.
And, afford my smoking habit from that. Shit, I did it with pills.
Oh, right.
Pills, and I would resell the pills at a higher cost for individual pills and support my habit by selling pills and middlemanning. So I totally understand that game, that entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah. So now you're 16, you're selling a lot more weed.
Yeah, not loads. Like I would say, there were times when I maybe bought a bigger amount, but usually it was like 2 or 3 ounces at the time, and then dishing it out and then cycling around. Sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on, what was going on. But the thing for me was making sure that I always had some. I never ran out. Like I always had dope.
Still smoking cigarettes and drinking?
Yeah, still smoking cigarettes, drinking, getting drunk every Friday and Saturday night. But I think a lot of my friends were doing that. But the difference between me, that again, now I'm more aware of, was that I would do it on my own. So Friday, Saturday night, when we were 14, 15, we were going to the pub. Like we had a band and we used to jam in my dad's garage at home. He would move the car out and we'd set up the drums and the amps and everything, and like rehearse in the back of my house, and then we'd all go up to the pub, and that was the average Friday night, and Saturday night was the same. And then if someone's parents went away on holiday and there was a free house, everyone would go around there, and there were parties and stuff like that. So
what was the drinking age there?
The drinking age here is, as far as I remember, has always been 18. Yeah, so you're meant to be 18. You can go into a pub with an adult at 14, and I think you may even be able to drink alcohol at 16 if you're with an adult. But in terms of going in on your own and ordering a pint, you're supposed to be 18. But we had fake IDs. So that was another thing. I broke into an office in some university somewhere with my friends, and we found a box of NUS cards, like the National Union of Students, so student cards. But in those days, they were like cardboard with a bit of laminate, sticky laminate, and you were supposed to fill it in by hand, and then the college would stamp it, and then you sealed it. And we found a load of those. So we started making fake passes for people, and you just put a fake date of birth on it, and then you could get into clubs, you could get into the pub and stuff like that. So that was a good bunny owner as well. So I had one of them. So whenever I was asked, I flashed that, and nobody seemed to bother. And also I was quite tall. I had growth spurts early, so I was quite tall, and everyone was doing it, though, to tell you the truth. Yeah, it was real pub culture. But then I would also drink at home. So even like when I was 11, 12, I would sit in my room on my own listening to music or practicing my guitar and getting stoned and getting drunk. If I had it, I would use it. And if I had anything else, I would use that too, So.
All right. Did you finish school?
I didn't do I didn't do very well at school, but I stayed in school. I did just about enough to keep me in there. So I did my GCSEs, I did my A levels. I got like 2 Ds and an E in my A levels, which is useless. But I didn't really care because I just wanted to be a rock star. You know, I just wanted to be in a band. I wanted to give somebody what Metallica had given me when I was a kid. And there was a real kind of driving me, a passion for being a musician who wrote songs that would be important to a kid who felt as lost and as broken as I did when I was a kid. So that's all I wanted to do, and I was like, well, I don't need these qualifications. I didn't like the education system. I kind of resented it. So I just wanted to. I just wanted to play in bands. So that's what I was doing. I was playing in bands, and then again, I think to keep my parents happy, I went to Manchester to a music college, like a music university, a place called University College Salford, and I went up there. But I was classically trained on piano and violin, but I was self-taught on guitar and drums. And they let me in on the strength of my piano and violin because I was like grade 8 standard. But I said, look, I don't want to do classical stuff. I want to play guitar. So can I play guitar? And they were like, well, if you get up to the same standard in your guitar in the first year, we'll let you continue. Otherwise, you have to switch to violin or piano. So in that first year, that was my goal. But I moved into this house with a few guys who liked smoking dope, and met loads of other people who started taking drugs, who liked taking drugs. I set up a band. There were loads of pills on the scene by now. So the whole rave scene was going on. I wasn't really involved in that, but there were a lot of clubs where the pills were just everywhere. You know, Doves and Double Doves, all those early kind of ecstasy kind of experiences. So I got into that, and again smoking dope all the time and dealing to other people in college, and I got thrown out after a year basically. Well, they said to me, if you want to stay, you have to do piano and violin. I was like, no way, I'm not doing it. And so I came home after a year, came back to London, came back to my old bedroom, everything.
Okay, and you still wanted to be a musician at that point?
Yeah, so at that time I wanted to be a musician, and I had some mates. Well, I had a mate who was in a band, and they were using a drum machine. So he was the guitarist front man, and there was a guy playing bass, and they were using a drum machine. And he was like, look, I know you're not a drummer, but I know you can hold down a beat. So can you just come and help us out? So I was like, yeah, sure, man. And I had fucked around on the drums, but I never really played as a drummer. I was always a guitarist. But I really took to it. I sat behind the kit and started playing. We started playing these songs, and I started sort of getting into the drums and learning the drums a bit more in terms of, you know, teaching myself and figuring it out and trying to get good. And then we basically made an attempt to get signed. So we were rehearsing 3 times a week. We were like gigging every weekend. We were doing demos, recording demos, got a manager, did all that kind of stuff. And then the record companies started coming, and it was it was a great time, man. It was a really good time. And the only problem was, you know, it was around Kurt Cobain and all the 90s and the whole heroin chic thing. And there was this big campaign in the UK called Heroin Screws You Up. And they had these big billboard pictures of people who were like fucked up on heroin and looked like they were dying and like really spotty and stuff like that and skinny. But my addict head was looking at those posters going, wow, if someone's prepared to do that, to make themselves that messed up, it must be really good. So there was a part of me that really wanted to do it, and I was really inquisitive. And at one point we found a way to do it, or where to get it from. And yeah, started using heroin and just smoking. So I never actually injected heroin. I only ever smoked it on the foil. And I knew if I started injecting, I would never go back to smoking. You know, and since working in the field, I kind of know that that's generally speaking is true. Most people who gravitate into injecting, they don't go back because the financial side of it is so much cheaper to inject. So
I was a pill snorter.
Really?
Yeah, I snorted pills.
What kind of pills?
What, oxycodone?
Oh, right. Wow. Yeah, that's the problem in the US, isn't it?
Yep. Now they're fake. Now they're fake fentanyl press
Yeah.
pills. But I haven't touched opiates in over 6 years.
Well done, man. That's great.
And thank you. And I'm afraid to touch
Yeah.
opiates again
Yeah.
because they could just be fentanyl pills nowadays. I hear that actual oxycodone pills aren't really as readily available as the fentanyl press pills. And that's a huge epidemic here. And fentanyl is everywhere. Xylazine is in my state. I live in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Xylazine is a big issue. I don't know if you've had xylazine out there.
I haven't heard of that, but it could be called. There's a new thing on the scene here because the fentanyl did come over, and there's been a lot of problems with it. And there's another one that's come over. I can't remember the name of it, but it could be the one you're talking about.
Xylazine is horse tranquilizer,
but it's different from ketamine.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because ketamine's a problem there.
Yeah, no. Ketamine is a problem more on the West Coast.
Right.
And xylazine is a problem more on the East Coast.
Yeah, yeah.
Xylazine eats away your body, literally. So, like, people are losing limbs. They're having giant sores on their arms.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, I grew up 10 minutes from Kensington, Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
And anybody knows what Kensington is. It's one of the biggest open air drug markets in the world.
Yeah, I've seen it on YouTube. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's a rough scene to look at what's going on over there. Everybody is just high on tranquilizer and high on fentanyl these days. There's no real heroin anymore. No. Heroin doesn't exist in Pennsylvania. It's all fentanyl. And it's all xylazine, and it scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid to relapse. I had a relapse about a year ago, but that was on my own medication. That was on benzos and weed.
Right.
And the benzo is where my prescription from CVS, it wasn't buying off the street.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what I was getting out of them. But that's just, I haven't had a sip of alcohol in 4.5 years.
Well done.
I haven't touched benzos or weed in 5 months. I'm 2 months clean from gambling.
Wow.
So I'm in a bunch of different fellowships.
Yeah. Well, I found the same thing, man. My addiction pops up everywhere, like in different ways. And I've been addicted to pornography. I was addicted to, Blu-ray systems, like cinema systems and Blu-ray discs, and fucking buying compulsively, spending more than I should. And I was a heavy smoker up until 2015. So, I continued to smoke cigarettes really, really heavily. And I'd put down all the mind-altering stuff, but the cigarettes were a thing. But the other thing that I'm now having to deal with is sugar. So I've always really, really loved sugar and sweet things in quite a kind of ravenous way. And about 2021, I was told, "Oh, look, you're almost borderline diabetic, so you need to sort it out." And I did 8 months of abstinence from sugar, did really well, brought it right down to normal levels. And then I went into Tesco, one of the supermarkets we have here, and there was like a Kit Kat Easter egg on like reduction, like it was after Easter and it had gone down to like 50 pence or something. It was ridiculous, a huge one. And just compulsively my addict was like, yeah, I'll have that. So I bought it, went home, ate it, tried to kind of keep it to myself, but then that was it. And I've been in a relapse ever since. So I kind of be back and forth, like overindulging and then trying to be abstinent, but not really managing it, trying to control it, being all over the shop with it. And then I had some blood tests about a month ago, and they said, "Oh, you're back up. You're even closer to being diabetic now, so you have to sort it out." So since I came back from a holiday a couple of weeks ago, I'm trying my best to be abstinent. Well, I haven't had any chocolate or cakes or donuts and stuff like that, which is my main poison, or any ice cream. I've had like half a sugar in my tea, and I have to have sugar in coffee, so I've had 2 sugars in my coffee. But I used to have 3 sugars in my tea and 3 sugars in my coffee. So I'm kind of getting there, but it's hard, man.
I did the same thing with coffee. Except for I cut out sugar,
Right.
I don't put any sugar in my coffee. I use a lot of creamer, which
Right.
isn't any you know what I mean? Like I can't drink coffee black. I need to have French vanilla creamer. It's got to be a certain brand. And if
Right.
I don't have that, but I'll drink. I work for a hospital system answering phone calls all day.
Right.
Work 11-hour shifts. I work 4
Wow.
11.5-hour shifts.
Yeah.
I technically am on the phones for 10 hours. I get an hour and a half long lunch break in order to attend my daily NA meeting.
Well, that's good.
So I'm on the phones for 10 hours and I start my day at 6:30. So I go through, I have this thing, it holds 4 cups of coffee, this giant tumbler, and I might drink 3 or 4 of them in a 10-hour shift.
Really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You're definitely an addict.
Yep, I'm sure am. And then plus I drink my Celsius drinks, which are energy drinks.
Right.
So we have one of those soda streams and I make my own Celsius at home.
Oh yeah.
So, I'm all over the place with the sugar. I totally get that. And I smoke cigarettes still.
Right.
That's my next thing to contact. I turned 38 the end of September.
Right. Happy birthday.
So my plan is before I'm 40. And the problem is, it's like with the drugs, man. I didn't quit until I wanted to quit, not when I needed to quit. I need to quit smoking cigarettes, but I don't want it enough to quit smoking cigarettes, if that makes sense. I need to stop doing drugs, but it wasn't working until I wanted it to work.
Well, when I was doing the chair yesterday, I said to people, look, I loved heroin. I loved heroin up until the end. I would love heroin now, man. If someone's waiting to not love the drug anymore, or whatever it is, or cigarettes or sugar or whatever, for me, that wasn't going to happen. But what I didn't love was the consequences. And those were the things that motivated me. But yeah, I would, I can't deny it. I would love some heroin. I would love to have like 5 donuts. I would love to like smoke a cigarette with a coffee in the morning. But the thing is, I just can't, because when I do that shit, it just goes off the scale. Like I got off cigarettes by vaping, right? But then I got really obsessed with the vaping, and my addict just came to life around the vaping. I was like buying loads of vapes, and I ended up like dripping. Do you know what dripping is? Where you take the top off. Have you ever heard of that? So dripping is when you've got a vape without a tank, and you can take the top off the mouthpiece, and you've got your coils underneath, and you just drip them till the cotton saturated. Then you vape, and then when it's just about dry, you do it again. And it's really good because you can use different liquids and have different flavors all in one thing. So you don't have to do a whole tank down. But
I'm afraid to vape, to be honest, because I don't want to be able to smoke inside. You know what I mean? If I could smoke inside, I would be smoking way more.
Yeah, well, that's what happened to me.
I live in an apartment complex, so I have to go all the way outside in order to light up a cigarette.
Right.
When I work,
that's a good thing.
I use nicotine gum.
Okay.
I realized that my doctor could prescribe it. And when my doctor prescribes it, I don't have to pay. It's $43 for this pack of nicotine gum.
Right.
But if your doctor prescribes it to you, then you just pay the copay, $1.
Okay.
So I get packs of it for $1, and I go through probably 100 pack a month, because I'll go while I'm working, and they taste good with cigarettes.
Right.
So I'm not smoking a cigarette with my coffee, but I said that wrong. I chew it while I drink my coffee, and it tastes good. So I'm not smoking. Yeah. So they go kind of hand in hand.
Yeah.
When it comes to that. So I still have my nicotine fix. I'm working on it. You know what I mean? It's a work in progress, but
it's all a work in progress.
Yeah. That's why the show is called Progress, Not Perfection.
Yeah, it's true, man, because, I didn't really understand addiction and the way that it can hop about and the way that it's in me. Like, I thought it was, when I went to rehab, I just wanted to quit the heroin and methadone. I wanted to carry on drinking and smoking dope. I thought it was the heroin and methadone was the problem. And then I learned, oh, no, it's not. You can't have any mind-altering substances, and you have the disease of addiction, and you have to treat it. And then so I did that. But then it started coming out in my behaviors and all these other different things. And with the vaping, I got so addicted to it. I was doing it so much that I got pneumonia. I ended up with pneumonia, and it was so painful and made me so ill. And I was on antibiotics for like nearly 12 weeks, like 3 courses of antibiotics, like over 12 weeks, like stronger and stronger ones to get rid of it. And then I developed asthma, which I never had before, from that pneumonia. And it made me really, really ill. But luckily, it made me stop. So at that point, I didn't vape, I didn't smoke, and that's what got me off. So I don't change until I'm pushed into a corner. Until I can't do it anymore, I keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, even if it's self-destructive. So yeah, man, my addict, like yours, is it's progress, not perfection, man. We've got to do what we can each day. When we get up, you do the best you can and hope that it'll be okay. But yeah,
so let's backtrack again. Now you're smoking heroin. It's the mid-90s. Grunge music is the scene now. I mean, I'm sure you were still listening to heavy metal, and you had said Kurt Cobain, so I assume you got into grunge music too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And now you're
Huge
smoking heroin. Now you're smoking heroin.
Yeah.
Were you doing that by yourself?
No, there were other people around. I obviously shouldn't talk about anybody else, but yeah, there was a whole crew of us. Like there was a crew, there was a scene in Camden that I was part of, and there was about, I would say about 10, maybe 20 bands who were all kind of gigging together, and we all knew each other. And out of that, there was probably about 5 or 6 of us that really got into the heroin. There was a few people that dabbled, like on the periphery, but there was about 5 or 6 of us who became like regular heroin users, and were probably the addicts in the group, as it were. And so it didn't take long for me to become addicted and to be using all the time. And then it started to affect, you know, my position in the band and what I could and couldn't do, and my reliability, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it created friction. And then in the end, we got dropped by the record label. They just said, you guys, you know, you're a bit of a mess and you need to put your shit together. So we had recorded an album, but they didn't release it. So it was fully recorded. We went into a really nice studio and recorded this thing, and it was mastered and everything ready to go. We'd done the cover with a designer, and you know, it was all ready to go. We were playing loads of gigs, and then they just said, look, you get yourself together, or we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna put it out. But by that time, like the relationships in the band had been fractured, you know, so we were kind of not getting on with each other, and like I was more interested in using, to be honest, and so it fell apart. And then I found myself, I think I was 27 around that time. It's all a bit hazy, but around that time I found myself basically no band, no qualifications, no career. I was working in Virgin Megastore. I was working in a newsagents, I think, chain of newsagents, and so I had no prospects really. It all kind of fell apart. But that just made me go deeper into the heroin. So I just was using and working and using and working and working. And a Virgin Megastore, it was like easy money, man. I would just steal left, right, and center. I could get CDs off the shop floor or out of the stockroom and get my friends to refund me cash. So I would pretend they were my CDs and say to my friend, oh, I just want to return these. They're not very good. But I would do that all the time and go to a different person because it was a big one in a big shopping center. And I don't know how I got away with it. And some of the stuff I was doing just wasn't good. There were PlayStations. There was a PlayStation, I think there was a PlayStation 2 or 3, the big black one with the blue lights. Anyway, so I was kind of shifting them out the back door, you know, headphones, stuff like that I could get money for, because I was in the stockroom a lot of the time before the tags went onto things, and we had to put all the rubbish out, all the cardboard from the things that had come in. We had to put it out in the bins, and sometimes I'd be doing that on my own. So I would just stick a PlayStation in there, go downstairs, And when I put it in the bin, I would take the PlayStation out, put it under the bin, hide it a bit, and then in my lunch break, I'd come around, get it, go and take it to a park across the road, hide it there, come back, and then when I finish work, I'd pick it up, go and sell it to someone. Sometimes the dealer took it because they could sell it to their friends or give it to someone as a present. So they took it in exchange for gear. So yeah, I was using even more, and then I was selling stuff, and my parents had brought me a violin. So when I was doing I think I was doing my grade 6, my teacher said he needs a proper violin, a good one. So they bought me this violin. I think it was about $1,000 or $1,500. It was like a really nice, expensive violin. And I just took it to the music shop and 200 quid cash. Went in there like sweating, withdrawing, desperate for the money. I said, how much will you give me for this? And he was like, I'll give you 200 quid cash. And I was like, yeah, that's it. Bang, bang, gone. Never seen again, And then I tried to sell my brother's French horn and his trumpet, but then they wouldn't take it without a certificate of purchase. So I was stealing out of my dad's wallet and my mum's purse, and lying to them, and just it was terrible. It was terrible. It got really bad, and I went down to 6 3/4 stone. Don't know how much that is in kilos, but I was significantly underweight. I wasn't really eating. I was just using and using and using and using. And then all that stuff happened with the counselor, and then I got introduced to NA through him, and then I had that awakening, and then I went to rehab.
Yeah, NA is good like that, where it can kind of walk you into the right path, and if you really want it, it's going to work. And it's a lot more of a rigid program than AA, in my opinion. Yeah, I had been through the steps in AA, and you can go through 3 steps in an hour.
Oh yeah.
But in NA, there's that workbook.
And you've got to write so much.
Yeah. So I feel like I needed to do NA this time. I did AA before, and it worked. But I feel like after my relapse last year, I needed to do something more structured, if that makes sense. So, and I found a meeting based out of Rhode Island, and it's because NA, I live in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
There's one NA meeting a week, and there's like 3 people that show up to it.
Really? Oh my God.
AA is pretty big around where I live, but I couldn't talk about drugs in AA. They want you to confine their discussions to alcohol only. Yeah, it's literally in their literature when they read it every day is confine your discussions to alcohol. And, I am an alcoholic, but it's not what's been bothering me for the last year. I haven't had a sip in 4.5 years. Alcohol is the last thing on my mind. I needed to address the drugs part of it. Yeah. So I find myself feeling good after an NA meeting that I go to every day. And I do Gamblers Anonymous on the weekends.
Right.
Found a meeting based out of Vegas because I figured if anyone gambling,
there's people in Vegas for sure, man, for sure.
Yep. So, and is that the fellowship you're part of? Is NA?
Yeah, definitely. I've even got that.
Oh yeah.
So I got it this way up. So when I'm walking around, if you don't know what it is, people think it's like Japanese or something, or and then you lift your arm up and they're like, "Oh, right, okay." But people who know what it is clock it straight away.
I got progress, not perfection, on my inner arm. It was my first tattoo.
Really?
No, well, it was my second tattoo ever. Right. When I was 18, I got my last name on my arm. Right. But when I got sober the first time, I left rehab, and I was in California. I was in Los Angeles, and we were walking down the Venice boardwalk, and there was a tattoo shop. And the first 30 days of rehab, all I kept saying was progress, not perfection. It was instilled in my head. Yeah. So I went into this tattoo shop, and they were like, "What do you want?" I was like, "Progress, not perfection." And I wanted it. It's written so that when I'm looking at my arm, I can read it. It's not.
You can read it. Yeah, that's
good. It's upside down to you, but it's right side up to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I made friends with a graffiti artist who did tattoos in her front yard for fun.
Cool.
And she would give them out for free as long as you like paid for the supplies. She would do free tattoos if you were new in sobriety. So I went to rehab with one, and I came home to Pennsylvania with 16. So,
Wow.
and I'm an addict.
Yeah, you definitely are an addict, man.
You know, I always say my addiction is I'm addicted to more.
Yeah.
More of whatever is filling that void is what I'm addicted to.
I can relate to that, man. I can totally relate to that.
So I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. I've had a few people from London on the show, so it's always good to hear the differences and similarities in the countries and the addiction.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been to meetings all over the world, India, Australia, France, you know, just fucking everywhere. And New Jersey, I went to a couple of meetings in New Jersey, which were amazing. And, you know, it's a worldwide thing, you know, and it's supporting people around the world, and it's free. And, you know, it's definitely saved my life, but it's also taught me how to live a life, you know, and given me a life. And I met my wife in NA. She's a recovering addict. I met her there. And then now, you know, I work in the field and I help people. Like, in fact, when I did the chair yesterday for the rehab, there was like 30 or 40 people in this room, and I was doing this chair. And then at the end, people came up and spoke, and there were 3 guys in there who I'd assessed and told to go to rehab. So I didn't know that was going to happen. And they're like, this guy comes on, he's like, hey man, I just want to say thank you. And it was like, what? And then another one comes up, and then another one. I was thinking, oh my God, is this a setup or something? But it was, you know, I'm really fortunate and lucky that my recovery has given me this work. And I work with musicians, I work with footballers, I work with people in the entertainment, sport industry, music industry, and help people, you know, to find recovery if that's what they need, or healing if it's healing that they need, from a, you know, psychotherapeutic point of view.
So you're an addictions counselor.
I'm a psychotherapist, a generic psychotherapist, but addiction is my speciality. So I used to run a rehab called Steps to Recovery, and I now I run a company called We Are Attune. If you look up We Are Attune, it'll come up. We just had a podcast actually launched called Empathy for the Devil, which is the three of us with 3 directors, and we're all in recovery, and we were talking about basically deconstructing the lives of musicians who have died from addiction. So we did Brian Jones, Kurt Cobain, George Michael, Karen Carpenter, Whitney Houston, and Little Peep. So those were the first 6 episodes. And it's just us kind of deconstructing their lives, looking at what happened and why, and looking at the underlying clinical kind of processes that led to them, unfortunately, you know, leaving us too soon.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I always think about Kurt Cobain. I was born in '86, so I was younger when, you know, when the grunge scene hit, but I remember it being a kid.
Yeah.
And, you know, the music videos were always a big thing on MTV.
Yeah.
And I always think about, if Kurt Cobain never died, which Foo Fighters songs would have been played as Nirvana with Kurt Cobain singing? Because I could see Dave Grohl, he was a drummer, but I could see him as he was a writer for Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
So it made me wonder which songs he would have wrote for Kurt Cobain to sing.
Yeah.
And it kind of trips me out thinking about Kurt Cobain singing, you know, My Hero, or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because from my perspective of where it was at the time, when Nirvana were around, nobody even knew that Dave Grohl could play guitar or sing or any of that. So the idea of the Foo Fighters when Nirvana was still going was just not even a thought. None of us thought. So from my perspective, I think if Nirvana had kept going and Kurt Cobain had still been alive, then the Foo Fighters probably wouldn't have existed. But then, you know, a lot of people do spin-off stuff later on in their careers. So I imagine he would have done something at some point. But the Foos definitely wouldn't exist in the way that they do now.
even Dave Grohl left the Foo Fighters for a little bit and started that side project.
Crooked Vultures.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. So
And
I mean,
he played for Queens of the Stone Age. I mean,
Queens of the Stone Age.
yeah. That album with him playing drums, "Songs for the Deaf," is a brilliant album.
Yep. So it's funny to think about what would have happened to rock music if Kurt Cobain never died.
Yeah.
But the same could be said for, the Doors. What would have happened if he never died?
Yeah.
What would have happened? I'm blanking on his name right now. Jim
Morrison.
Jim Moore. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Janis Joplin died from this disease.
Can you imagine if Jimi Hendrix stayed alive?
Amy Winehouse.
Yeah.
She's local to you. And, I just watched that movie, Amy. It's on Peacock. I'm not sure if you guys get Peacock out there.
I think it's on Netflix.
It was really good, man. It was a really good. Yeah, my wife and I watched it about a month ago, and we really enjoyed it. It's on Peacock here.
Right.
And I could see that being on Netflix out there. Check it out. It's really good. And it's based on her story, which is they didn't dive deep into the addiction part of it. They mostly analyzed her relationships that she had. They didn't go into the heroin use at all.
Right.
But they did talk about her addictions. They did talk about a possible intervention. They just didn't show her doing drugs in the movie. So
it's funny actually because it's funny because I worked with a guy. One of my early clients was one of the guys who was selling them crack. When they wanted crack, they would call him, and he had smoked crack with them. I can't remember that guy's name she was with, but he had videos on his phone of them smoking crack, and he was like, I'm going to give them to the press and get money. And I was saying, oh man, don't do that. Like, look, we're all addicts, and people are addicts because they're traumatized. They're not addicts. It's not a fun thing. It's not something to joke about. This is her life, and you might be able to get some money. And I don't. He must have listened to me really, because it never came out. But I saw some video of it, which I don't think many people have seen. But
they talked about crack in the movie, though.
Really?
Yeah, they did. And I forget his name too. I'm blanking on his name. Her boyfriend, as she was throughout the addictions. But they did go into the crack use and all that, and it's really good. Check it out. I appreciate you sitting down and talking with me, Chula. It was nice getting to know you. Keep up great work with what you're doing, bud. I think it's awesome. I'm going back to school to be a counselor for drugs.
Oh, good. Great. Fantastic. Well done, man. That's cool.
I'm working towards where you're at, and so I can appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. And thanks for inviting me, man. It's a real privilege to be here. And if anyone wants to see any of the stuff I've done, if they go to my website, cmtherapy.co.uk, cmtherapy.co.uk, they can see that, or they can look on the We Are Attune website.
Send me the links, and I'll make sure they're in the description of the episode.
Sure. And I'm trying to launch my T-shirt brand as well. I've got a T-shirt brand, like recovery and therapy T-shirts, and like 10% of all the profits are going to go to the rehab that I used to run, Steps to Recovery, because they're a charity and they provide free rehab for people coming out of prison. So I'm trying to sort of make some money, but earn some money for them as well. And
you still got that entrepreneurial spirit in you.
Yeah, man. Got to keep it going. Got to keep working. keep working it, and we'll keep working life.
Yep. Have a nice day, bud.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Lots of love.
See ya.